In the 1500s, Spain found the greatest fortune in history: mountains of gold, rivers of silver. Treasure ships rolled into port so heavy they almost sank. Overnight, Spain became the richest empire the world had ever seen. But easy money is a dangerous gift. It makes you reckless, it makes you blind. And in less than a century, that fortune turned to debt, and the empire built on treasure began to crumble. This is how the gold rush that should have made Spain unstoppable destroyed it instead. New World, New Fortune. The year is 1492. Europe is in transition. The Middle Ages are fading, and the Renaissance is stirring curiosity, ambition, and competition. Kingdoms are rising, and the strongest are those that control trade. At the edge of the Iberian Peninsula, Spain has just united under King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile. They are young, ambitious, and hungry to prove their new power. But Spain lags behind its neighbor Portugal, whose explorers have already charted a sea route around Africa to the riches of India and the Far East. Spices, silk, porcelain, goods so rare and valuable that a single ship can change the fate of a kingdom are flowing into Lisbon. Every Portuguese voyage makes Spain look smaller. And then a man arrives with an outrageous proposal. Christopher Columbus, a Genoese sailor with unshakable confidence, claims he can reach Asia faster by sailing west across the Atlantic. No one knows what lies beyond that horizon. The experts warn him, the journey is too long, the ocean too vast. But Ferdinand and Isabella see an opportunity, a relatively small investment that could break Portugal's monopoly and put Spain at the center of global trade. This is the first entrepreneurial truth in Spain's story. Sometimes the boldest moves are the cheapest. If you act before your rivals and are willing to take a calculated risk. Columbus sails. After weeks of open water, he lands not in Asia, but in the Bahamas, and unknowingly opens the door to an entire continent. What follows is a chain reaction. Spanish expeditions push deeper into the New World. Conquistadors, part soldiers, part entrepreneurs, arrive with royal charters and private ambitions. Hernán Cortés topples the Aztec Empire in Mexico. Francisco Pizarro brings down the Inca Empire in Peru. These conquests are brutal. Cities are burned, leaders executed, entire civilizations reshaped. From palaces and temples, gold is stripped and melted into bars. Silver pours out of the earth, especially from the mountain of Potosí, a place so rich it becomes legendary. Indigenous labor, often forced, and African slaves work the mines under deadly conditions, feeding an ever-growing stream of treasure. In Seville, the sight becomes routine. Treasure ships arriving heavy with bullion, their hulls creaking under the weight. Chests of coins spill across the docks. Merchants, bankers, and royal officials swarm the harbor. For the first time in its history, Spain feels untouchable. But the higher you climb, the faster the fall if you're not watching your footing. The gold and silver are more than wealth. They are power. They buy armies, build fleets, and finance the expansion of an empire that will stretch across the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa. But here's the second entrepreneurial truth. A windfall can be the most dangerous kind of income. When money comes too easily, discipline becomes optional. And when discipline fades, the seeds of collapse are planted. The Spanish crown sees its vaults filling and assumes they always will. Instead of building industries at home, they import goods from abroad. Instead of investing in productivity, they spend on displays of power, grand palaces, lavish courts, endless wars. And all the while, the real threat to Spain's empire was already forming from within. It's the same trap modern businesses fall into when early success convinces them they've made it. They hire too fast, spend too much, and stop innovating because the money is flowing and the market feels theirs. For Spain, the gamble paid off beyond its wildest dreams. The discovery of the New World turned a second-tier kingdom into the wealthiest power in Europe in just one generation. But the choices made in this moment, how they spent, what they built, and what they ignored, would decide whether that wealth lasted. Fortune favors the bold, but it also tests them. When the big win comes, the question isn't just how do you use it, it's will you be ready when it stops? The Silver Deluge, when easy money fuels inflation. By the mid-1500s, Spain's empire is in full swing. The conquests are over, but the real treasure has only just begun to flow. From the mines of Mexico and Peru, and most famously from the mountain of Potosí, discovered in 1545, silver pours out in staggering quantities. Potosí is unlike anything Europe has ever seen. A single mountain so rich in ore that the locals call it the mountain that eats men. Tens of thousands of indigenous laborers and later African slaves work in brutal conditions to feed Spain's hunger for silver. Miners descend deep into narrow shafts, the air thick with dust and mercury vapors from the refining process. Many never return. Galleons cross the Atlantic heavy with this wealth, docking in Seville to unload tons of precious metal. Officials weigh it, register it, and send it into circulation. Within years, silver coins are flooding not just Spain, but all of Europe. What looked like endless prosperity was about to turn into an economic trap. At first, the effect seems miraculous. Royal coffers swell, merchants thrive, nobles live grander than ever before. But slowly, the numbers start to shift. Prices across Spain rise. Then they rise again. By the 1560s, the cost of living has doubled. Across Europe, the same pattern emerges. More silver means more coins chasing the same goods. The price revolution, historians call it. For Spain's exporters, it's a disaster. Their goods are now too expensive for foreign buyers, while cheaper imports from other nations flood Spanish markets. This is where easy money reveals its trap. When wealth comes fast, it feels infinite. Spending becomes easier than building. Production slows because imports are simpler than making things yourself. And while the money is still coming in, no one sees the danger. For entrepreneurs, the warning is clear. Cash flow without productivity is an illusion. If your prices rise faster than your value, you price yourself out of the market. The extra cash that feels like a blessing can quietly turn into poison. Spain's rulers didn't adapt. They saw the silver galleons as a guarantee, not a gift that required discipline. Inflation kept eroding purchasing power, but the crown's spending only grew. The empire looked richer than ever, yet its foundation was already softening. And when your foundation weakens, no amount of gold can save you. Silver had made Spain the envy of Europe. It was also making Spain less competitive, more dependent, and blind to the storm building on the horizon. Imperial overreach, the high cost of conquest. By the 1560s, Spain stands at the height of its power. The empire stretches from the Americas to Europe, Africa, and Asia. Gold and silver still flow across the Atlantic, but now the empire's ambitions are pulling it in every direction. Holding that much territory is not just a matter of prestige, it's a matter of constant defense. Every border is a front. Every sea lane must be guarded. Enemies are everywhere. In the Low Countries, Dutch rebels rise against Spanish rule. In the Mediterranean, Ottoman fleets challenge Spain's naval power. Across the Atlantic, English privateers, backed by Queen Elizabeth, stalk Spanish treasure ships. The empire answers with armies and fleets, vast, costly, and endless. Soldiers must be fed, armed, and paid. Ships require timber, cannons, and crews. The wars never stop. They simply shift from one theater to another. Even with the silver galleons arriving regularly, expenses begin to outpace income. King Philip II turns to the great banking houses of Europe, the Fuggers, the Welsers, the Genoese financiers. Loans are taken not just for emergencies, but to fund the everyday costs of running a global empire. Soon, the crown is borrowing against silver that hasn't even left the mines yet. Future treasure fleets are pledged as collateral. Interest rates climb. The weight of debt begins to press on Spain's golden image. In 1557, the illusion cracks. Philip II's government declares bankruptcy, suspending payments to its creditors. For the first time, the richest empire in Europe admits it cannot pay its bills. For the richest empire in Europe, this should have been a turning point, but it wasn't. The wars continue anyway. Spain doubles down, convinced that the next victory, the next treasure fleet, will set everything right. But the spending never slows, and the debts never truly vanish. For entrepreneurs, this is a familiar danger. Growth feels exciting. Expansion feels like progress. But if your core business isn't generating enough to sustain that growth, every new project is just another weight on your back. Debt can be a tool, but debt built on assumptions, not stability, turns into a trap. Spain's empire in the 1560s is a lesson written in gold and blood. Even the strongest position can collapse under its own weight. Without financial discipline, scale becomes a liability, not a strength. And Spain's liabilities were about to grow even faster. The galleons still sailed, the armies still marched. But from here on, Spain was running faster and faster just to stay in place, and the cracks in the empire were widening. From boom to bust. By the 1580s, Spain has already seen the warning signs. 2 decades earlier, Philip II's government had been forced to admit bankruptcy. The debt was crushing, the wars unending. But instead of slowing down, the empire presses harder. The Dutch revolt rages on, draining treasure and men year after year. The Netherlands is rich, strategically vital, and determined to break free. Spain cannot let it go without a fight. Then comes the gamble that will define the decade, the Spanish Armada. In 1588, Philip launches one of the largest naval fleets the world has ever seen, aimed straight at England. The goal is bold: to dethrone Elizabeth I, stop English privateers from attacking treasure ships, and secure dominance over the seas. The Armada fails spectacularly. English fireships scatter the fleet. Storms finish what cannons began. Dozens of ships sink. Thousands of sailors never return. The cost is staggering, not just in silver, but in prestige. The Armada's failure wasn't just a military defeat. It cracked Spain's image of invincibility. Meanwhile, the court in Madrid remains lavish. The palaces are full, the festivals continue, the image of wealth maintained. To fund it all, the crown borrows more, confident that American silver will keep arriving to cover the bills. But the flow of bullion is no longer certain. Pirates and privateers intercept treasure fleets. Storms sink others. Mining yields begin to slow. By 1575, Spain defaults again. By 1596, a third bankruptcy shakes the empire. This time, Europe takes note. The richest kingdom on the continent cannot pay its debts. The impact is immediate. Lenders tighten credit. Interest rates rise. The cost of borrowing skyrockets. Armies go unpaid. Supplies run short. even loyal troops begin to desert. For entrepreneurs, this is a textbook collapse in motion. Ignore early warnings, keep scaling without adjusting, and the market will correct you, brutally. Over-leverage built on optimistic forecasts is like building a bridge with rotten wood. It might hold for a while, but the first real stress will send it crashing. Spain believed the silver would always flow. They assumed victories would pay for themselves. But when both failed to arrive, the empire's debts didn't shrink. They multiplied. By the century's end, the image of Spain as an unstoppable superpower had faded. The cracks were now impossible to hide, and the rest of Europe was watching and preparing to take advantage. The vultures were circling, and Spain was running out of time. The long decline. Empire falls behind. The 17th century begins, and the empire that once dominated the world is no longer the same force. The flood of silver and gold from the New World, the lifeblood of Spain's wealth, begins to slow. The mines at Potosí and Zacatecas are not empty, but the richest veins are long gone. The easy ore has been taken. Miners now dig deeper, work slower, and produce less. Shipments shrink. Yet Spain's expenses remain enormous. The debts from decades of war still hang heavy, and the empire's leaders are unwilling or unable to cut back. For years, they had grown accustomed to simply buying what they needed from other nations. Fine cloth from Flanders, manufactured goods from England, ships built in foreign yards. Why invest in building your own industries when silver can buy anything? That logic worked when the treasure fleets were endless. Now, it leaves Spain vulnerable. And when rivals see weakness, they don't wait. They strike. Rising powers, England, the Netherlands, and later France, take advantage. They innovate in shipbuilding, trade, finance, and manufacturing. They reinvest their profits into their economies, creating self-sustaining growth. Spain, meanwhile, is left with an economy that produces little of its own, dependent on imports and crippled by high costs. Territories begin to slip away. The Netherlands wins independence. Portugal breaks free. Wars that once would have been fought with overwhelming force now drag on, too costly to win decisively. For ordinary Spaniards, the golden age is anything but. Inflation still lingers, wages stagnate, and opportunities shrink. The wealth of the empire seems to exist only for the crown and a small elite. This is the inevitable end of relying on one source of income. What seemed infinite turned out to be temporary. Without diversification, without reinvestment into productivity, the empire is left exposed. Entrepreneurs face the same trap on a smaller scale. Rely on one client, one product, or one market, and you give your future away to forces you cannot control. The winners are those who adapt before the well runs dry, who use today's success to prepare for tomorrow's competition. By the close of the century, Spain is no longer the center of wealth and power in Europe. The empire still exists on maps, but its best days are behind it. The story that began with bold risk-taking and unimaginable riches ends as a cautionary tale, proof that no boom lasts forever, and that fortune fades fastest when it isn't used to build something that lasts. But the final blow wasn't just economic, it was a loss of relevance. Spain's rise was meteoric. From a United Kingdom on the edge of Europe to the richest empire in the world, all in less than a century. Gold and silver turned them into a superpower. And yet, in another century, that same empire was in decline, drowning in debt, lagging behind its rivals. This is more than a story from history books. It's a playbook of what to do and what not to do when success comes fast. First, manage money with discipline. Spain's vaults were overflowing. But their spending had no brakes. They matched ambition with debt, not with stable income. In business, match your growth to reliable revenue, not to what you hope will come in. Second, diversify early. Spain relied on one golden goose, silver from the Americas. When that flow slowed, everything crumbled. In the modern world, one client, one platform, or one product line can be just as dangerous. Build multiple income streams while times are good. Third, reinvest into productivity. Spain's wealth bought palaces, wars, and imports, but it didn't build lasting industries. Use your wins to strengthen your systems, train your people, and create assets that keep producing long after the initial surge is gone. Fourth, stay vigilant. Spain assumed the good times would never end, but markets change, competitors rise, and what's valuable today can be worthless tomorrow. The moment you think you're untouchable is the moment you're most vulnerable. The Spanish Empire shows us that fortune is fleeting, but the structures you build with it can outlast you. The ships, the gold, the glory, all of it faded. What remained was the lesson. Bold moves create opportunity, but only discipline, adaptability, and diversification turn opportunity into a legacy. If you want to build something that lasts, don't just chase the treasure. Because if Spain's story teaches anything, it's this: the fortune is never the prize, the foundation is.